Okay, so this begins our series called 66 Books in 52 Weeks. Tonight we're going to look at the book of Genesis, and there's a few things I want to just keep you in mind of here. First of all, the reason we want to go through this is that the Bible is the foundation of the Christian faith. Without the Bible, we wouldn't know about the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Without the Bible, we wouldn't know about salvation. And it's just like Christianity stands or falls on the fact of the resurrection of Christ, Christianity stands or falls on this book. The fact that it is, the understanding of Christianity is that this is a God ordained, not just a God ordained, but a God inspired, God breathed book. It's 66 books in all that make up one message from God, and that it is what they call inerrant. That is, it is the perfect Word of God. I would encourage you, if you're if maybe having that conversation or thinking, oh, how can I actually trust the Bible itself? One thing I would encourage you to do is go back to the series we started at the beginning of last year, beginning of 2020. It's called the Anchored series, and you can just go to the teaching section on our website there. If you got the email, as far as you can see the past lessons. All of these lessons are archived. You can go back. There's a lesson called Can We Trust the Bible? And we just kind of go through there and talk about how can we trust the Bible. Another thing I want to just clarify is what we want to try to do in this is we want to show, one of my goals is to show Jesus connected to every one of these books in the Bible. That is one constant theme. Now, sometimes he is concealed in the book, sometimes he is revealed in the book, but we want to show Jesus throughout this whole thing. The other thing here is on your outline there, and you might have seen the link if you've got the email to log in. There's a link there for these Bible blueprints it's one-page summaries of every book of the Bible, and I'm using that as part of the source here for this. I've printed out the Genesis one that you can use. And now this is a thing that you can purchase. You can go and download this as a PDF online. There's a link on the outline there. But what I am also going to be doing, I was trying to make sure I was doing this legally. I didn't think I could just take it and email that PDF to everybody. That would not be in keeping with how we purchased this. But you can print this and use them in your church settings. So I'm going to print copies of all of these. Will be all 66 books. Maybe I'll just start with the Old Testament for now, and then we'll have copies of this packets available. And those of you who are Zoomers, you can come in and pick them up on here at the church, and I'll just have them available for anybody that comes into the room as well. So let's continue here as we look here in the book of Genesis. We start with just a quick summary, a little overview here. The book of Genesis it's the first book of the Bible. It's got 50 chapters in it. And you'll notice it says the type there is history or Pentateuch. The Bible is 66 books. Within this collection of books, there are different types of books. You'll find history books. You'll find poetry, Ecclesiastes, the book of Psalms. You'll find prophecy books. You'll find letters written or epistles that we call them in the New Testament. You'll find the Gospels, which are kind of like history books, but the Gospels are the history of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You have the book of Acts, which is a history book in the New Testament. And then in the New Testament also has a book of Revelation, or a prophecy, which is the book of Revelation. So you have all of these different types of books. Genesis is a history book. It is also a part of the Pentateuch. That is just, we get the word Pentagon. That means it's a five-sided building. It's the part of the first 5 books of the Bible. Moses is credited as the author of the first 5 books of the Bible, or the author of the Pentateuch. And so it's the first book of the Bible. It records creation, and it takes you all the way from creation to the time of Joseph. And then the structure here, this is from that handout, and I like the way this is outlined here. You have creation to the Tower of Babel. It's interesting, we're studying the book of Acts on Sunday mornings. We're going to be starting that in a couple of weeks. That Tower of Babel is the occasion where God confused the languages of everyone. They were building this tower, and God said, we're going to confuse their languages, and that's when people spread out and all these different languages, and according to their different languages, and different nations and tribes were formed according to that. And so when people were trying to get up to God or become God, God confused the languages. If you fast forward, we talked about Acts chapter 2 this past Sunday. That's the day of Pentecost. And then you have God coming down. And what happened on that day, this miraculous thing where the apostles were able to speak in languages they had not studied before. People from all over the world could understand the languages. So at the Tower of Babel, the sin confused all the languages, and then God's grace brought all the languages back together. So it's interesting how that ties together. I got to be careful here. I could preach on each one of these, but you've got the creation to the Tower of Babel. You've got the life of Abraham. Abraham, I called him the first Jew, which he was, the first Hebrew. He was the one that God called he would make a great nation. All nations would be blessed through him. You have the life of Isaac, which was the son of Abraham and Sarah. He was the son of promise. You have the life of Jacob. That was the son of Isaac. And then Jacob would have been the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. His sons would basically become, his 12 sons would basically become the 12 tribes of Israel. And then that brings us to the life of Joseph. And it was all those brothers that got together and kind of picked on Joseph. Of course, Joseph kind of told a bunch of dreams and got them mad, and they sold him into slavery. That's how they ended up into Egypt. So you go from creation to the creation of Israel to all the way into Egypt here. So that brings us down to a closer look, and you can go through the outline there. And again, this is one of the things, maybe you've heard this information before. Hopefully this could be a tool for you if you're talking to somebody about the Bible, that say, okay, this is what Genesis is about, and you can maybe have a simple way to explain it. So I have to simplify everything because I am simple, I guess. So let's start here, a closer look. The word Genesis literally means beginnings. All right? So the word Genesis literally means beginnings. It communicates the beginning of everything from the world itself to God's redemption plan for mankind. So we're going to kind of look at some of the beginnings that you'll find here in the book of Genesis. So the first beginning, the book of Genesis records the beginning of the universe. And so you have Genesis 1:1, of course, is a key verse in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And you've heard me say this, it's not original to me, but if you can believe in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, you can believe everything else the Bible has to share. And so this is a very powerful statement, just this one opening statement. It's interesting here that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Bible does not begin by giving a fivefold defense of the existence of God or explanation. It just assumes the existence of God and just starts off running. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. There you go. I found this in the Life Application Commentary. The simple statement that God created the heavens and the earth is one of the most challenging concepts confronting the modern mind. The vast galaxy we live in is spinning at the incredible speed of 490,000 miles per hour. I didn't realize I was going that fast. But even at this breakneck speed, our galaxy still needs 200 million years to make one rotation, and there are over 1 billion other galaxies just like ours in the universe. Some scientists say that the number of stars in creation is equal to all the grains of sand on all the beaches in all the world. Yet this complex sea of spinning stars functions with remarkable order and efficiency, and to say that the universe just happened or evolved requires more faith than to believe that God is behind these amazing statistics. God truly did create a wonderful universe. All of that is wrapped up into that simple statement. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Moving on to the New Testament, what it has to say is in the New Testament, it says, "As by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made of what is visible." That verse here is interesting. Theologians like to use this term when it comes to the creation of the world, is that God created the heavens and the earth ex nihilo. So ex nihilo is a fancy Latin word, I think, that just simply means out of nothing. God created the heavens and the earth out of nothing. If you think about it, everything that we see is there for some reason. You know, there's this microphone in front of me. It's here because it was caused to be here. Somebody invented it and put it together. That person that invented it and put it together was caused to be here because they had parents. And those parents were caused to be here because they had parents. And you keep going back and you keep going back, and you could take every little thing that you have and something caused it and something caused that. You go all the way back. God is the uncaused cause.
Is this a misprint on this?
I'm sorry there.
Is this a misprint?
A misprint on what is that? What is this?
It says Hebrews 11:1. Is it supposed to be 11?
Oh, it's 11:3. My bad there. So,
That's a misprint.
yeah, it's a misprint. I think it's right on my mind, but it's Hebrews 11:3 is that. So, another passage I would point you to is this is in the New Testament. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. I told you we'd find Jesus in every book of the Bible. Jesus was at creation. Now, there's other places we find him here, so we find him there. So Genesis records the beginning of the universe. Number 2, Genesis records the beginning of the human race. So this brings us to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 27. It says here, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." So we have the beginning here, another beginning of man and woman, the creation of all things. But the crowning achievement of creation was the creation of humanity, Adam and Eve. And so it's interesting here that it says here that that man and woman were created in the image of God. You know what that tells me is that there's a couple of things here. First of all, we are created in the image of God. But for all of human history, it seems as though we have been attempting to create God in our image. But we are to be imitators of God. We are created in the image of God. I like this. I know one time I had a college professor that a student came in and he made a simple mistake, and he said, "Are you?" And the student said, "Well, okay, I'm only human." And the professor said, "Wait a minute, only human. He says, it's not just only human. You are created in the image of God." And so instead of aiming for the lowest common denominator, our humanity, we can aim for the highest common denominator, the fact that we are created in God's image. We are a reflection of God. Now, we're not gods unto ourselves, but let that be, if you need a self-image booster, say to yourself that. So, also, finding Jesus in Genesis again here. Jesus is sometimes referred to as the second Adam. There was the first Adam. The first Adam brought sin to the world. There's the second Adam. The second Adam brought grace and forgiveness into the world. And so there's I'll read here in 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15:45, it says, "So it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The spiritual did not come first, but the natural, and after that the spiritual. The first man was of the dust of the earth, the second man from heaven," the incarnation. Isn't that interesting? "As was the earthly man, so are those who are of the earth, and as was the man from heaven, so are all those who are of heaven. And just as we have borne the likeness of earthly man, so we shall bear the likeness of man, of the man from heaven." So it's interesting how Jesus is the second Adam, the first of the resurrection in a sense there. And so the first Adam is an example of natural life. We all inherit natural life from him. The second Adam, Jesus, is the example of spiritual life and grace. All who are alive spiritually are descendants of Christ in that sense. So is what the Apostle Paul is getting at. So now, Genesis records the beginning of the human race, and when the human race entered the scene, it wasn't long until Genesis records the beginning of sin. So that brings us to God's command in Genesis 2:15 through 17. "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, 'You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will surely die.'" So God gave this command, very clear command: enter the serpent, also the devil, we would say, or Satan, the tempter. He comes in and he deceives the woman, just puts a question, did God really say? And he kind of exaggerates God's command. He says, did God really say you can't eat from any of these trees? He says, no, he said just this one tree. And in the day we eat, we'll die. That it will bring death upon us. And the devil said, or the serpent said, no, you're not going to die. He's just afraid you're going to be like him. In other words, God's holding out on you. So that's what the devil says. And then we see here, when the woman saw, this is in Genesis 3, 6, and 7, when the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. And then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. That right there is known as the fall. Capital letters, the fall of mankind. So Genesis records the beginning of creation, beginning of humanity, and then we have the beginning of sin. And now Genesis also records the beginning of God's redemption plan. Again, we're going to see Jesus all through this book. Even though you don't see him by name, you see him here. So, beginning of God's redemption plan. Even after the fall, after Adam and Eve fell, God made a prediction. He presented, even when he was confronting Adam and Eve, where have you been? Who told you were naked? That whole confrontation he had. Even in the midst of confronting them, and he confronted the serpent too, he begins to predict the Messiah, the ministry of Jesus. And so here is that prediction there, Genesis 3:15. God is speaking. He says, "And I will put enmity between you," that is the devil, "and the woman," the serpent I should say, "and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He," that is Jesus, "will crush your head." That's the resurrection. "And you will strike his heel." That's the cross. You can see all of those things. Like I say, some places Jesus is revealed, some places Jesus is concealed. You can see the ministry of Jesus, the whole gospel is concealed right in this verse here. And Jesus Christ, again, fulfills that redemption plan And so in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14, since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held by slavery, by fear of death. For surely it is not angels he helps, but Abraham's descendants. And so again, that passage there from Hebrews just goes on to talk about how the ministry of Jesus and how that the curse was taken care of, or the enemy, the serpent, was crushed because of what Jesus did. So I know I'm kind of moving through this information here. I'm just trying to make sure we get through it here tonight. You know, we got to get through 66 books, so I'm going to talk a little faster maybe. So the next one here, number 5, Genesis records the beginning of the nation of Israel. And the nation of Israel begins with an important figure, Abraham. And so this is God calling Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. The Lord had said to Abram, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to a land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." Again, you see another picture of Jesus' ministry, the Gospels going through here. God began a nation from one person, Abraham. So from Abraham and Sarah, then you have, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes, all of that happens in there. And so the whole nation of Israel comes from Abraham. Eventually, through the nation of Israel, God will fulfill the prophecy, and Jesus would be born as an Israelite, or as a descendant of Abraham. And so when he says, "I will make your name great," everybody knows who Abraham is. "You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." That is a shadow of greater things to come. It's the shadow of the gospel. Blessing to all nations, prediction of Jesus. Eventually Jesus would be born through the nation of Israel, and the gospel would go out and be a blessing to all. And now, in the book of Acts that we're studying on Sunday mornings, it's that ever-widening circle that we're seeing right now. Another passage here, this is in Galatians. The scripture foresaw that God would justify the Gentiles, that's those that are not descendants of Abraham, the Gentiles by faith, and announced the gospel in advance to Abraham. All nations will be blessed through you. Again, that phrase, the gospel, simply means the good news of Jesus Christ. And you can see there are 66 books by all these different writers, all these different authors, and it's one message together. It's kind of an amazing, miraculous thing to see all of this. Let's just go back through here and we'll see if there's any questions, anything we can do to clarify some things here. We'll just do this for a while. And
I have a quick question. Can you go over real quick Noah, because in some of the books in the New Testament, I forget which book it is, where it says it'll come upon them like the day of Noah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just kind of go over that real quick and just kind of kind of explain it a little bit?
Absolutely, sure. So you've got the book of Noah, the book of Noah, the account of Noah, and that would begin in Genesis chapter 6. And so, as in the days of Noah. So it's interesting here. We'll see here. We see here that God speaks to Noah at the beginning of Genesis 6. And let me just read this. I'll just kind of go through this. When men began to increase in number on earth, and the daughters were born to them, and the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, they married any of them they chose. Now that's a whole thing that's kind of a mystery to some people. I can't really get into explaining that tonight, that whole thing. But we'll get to this. The Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. Now, some people take that verse to mean that nobody will be able to live past 120 years. That you'll never find a person that lives to 121 years old. My take on that is this, that we might see people live past 120, but what he's saying is that in 120 years from the time that I'm talking to you, Noah, 120 years from now, I'm going to send a flood. I'm sending judgment. So he had 120 years to work on this ark. And so all of humanity here we see was just corrupt and just beyond imagination. And God gave Noah this instruction to build this ark. And all these detailed instructions. I tell you one thing, if you ever get a chance to go see the Ark Encounter down in northern Kentucky, it's just fantastic. It's just amazing. And there's all these details. I'm kind of a big picture kind of a person. There's all these details that you see, and that you can read. You could spend days there reading all the little things, and those are all great. But the big thing I came out of is, as I came out of that, I was thinking, this could have happened. You know, if there was one thing I brought out of that, I just looked in this and I said, this really could have happened. Not that I didn't believe it before, but just seeing it and seeing the way things were put together, this is definitely a possibility. You know, by God's grace, it could have happened. But what you have here is, for 120 years, Noah was building this ark. I'm sure he was mocked. I'm sure people didn't understand. But in the days of Noah, suddenly, God's judgment came. And it happened suddenly, and it was a thorough judgment, wrath of God. He destroyed every living thing, and then except for those that were on the ark. Noah's family and all of the animals that they had on the ark. And you know, that old song we said, Noah found favor in the eyes of God. Noah found grace in the eyes of God. I don't know everything there is to know about that boat. And I don't know how accurate everything is at the Ark Encounter. It's really amazing what they put together. But I can tell you, I know what the name of that boat is. The name of that boat is the SS Grace, because it was by grace that that they were on that boat. And so I don't know if that helps. I think Abby, was that Abby Spring? Abby, you were asking the question was, you know, when Jesus was saying, as it was in the days of Noah, what he's saying is, just as God's judgment came suddenly back then, you know, we're just so used for the earth going on just normally like it is. There will be a day in which God will bring a conclusion to things. And it will be sudden, and it will happen, and there will be people that will doubt and people that will mock, and certainly people say, hey, everything's going on as it is since the beginning, that this is never going to happen. But as Peter says, as you know, mark my word, you know, as a day is 1,000 years, 1,000 years are like a day in the eyes of God, and that judgment day is coming. So it's interesting how the New Testament dips into things that uses pictures from the Old Testament. It doesn't mean that these things are symbolic. They really happened, but they also paint a picture of something greater to come. So does that answer your question? Is that what you're looking for there? Hopefully I can clarify things there for you.
Thank you.
So any other questions here, or any other thoughts? Yes.
What was the thread made out of that Adam and Eve used for their leaves?
Well, I know that they sewed some fig leaves together, and what the thread was, I'm not sure. So they probably just went to the store, and no, they didn't do that, but they somehow,
Probably a vine. Maybe.
it probably a vine or something that they, you know, were able to just make into some kind of. But the thing on that is, suddenly, as soon as they sinned, their eyes were opened, and they realized that something was wrong. And they realized their innocence was gone, and so it's just quite a profound thing. Suddenly, they're covering. And we, there's, I think you can kind of look at the fig leaf symbolically too. We all kind of hide who we really are in a sense, in a certain sense. Sin causes us to cover things up, and so it's quite a thing there. Any other questions here? Zoomers or rumors?
Dave, I got a question
Yes.
about the 12 sons of Jacob.
Yes.
How they became the 12 tribes, but it's not, the tribes aren't, or the land that was part of the tribes it doesn't correspond with the sons, and some of the tribes you don't hear much about, and some like Judah you hear a lot about.
Yeah. We will,
and how that all evolved.
we will get to that and have a very detailed listing out of the tribes and kind of how that worked out. Because it is true, if you look at the names of all the sons, and then you look at the tribes, some of them match up and some of them don't. A couple of the tribes, my understanding, were named after some sons of Joseph. And so there was two tribes, there was two half tribes there. And so there's a son of Joseph, half tribe of Manasseh, I believe that was the one. But we'll go through, we will look at that in detail as far as just how that how that plays out. So when I say, the 12 sons of Jacob, I say that, did become the 12 tribes of Israel. That is true, but it's not an exact, it's not exactly, some might have been a couple of grandsons, but all of the 12 tribes come out of Jacob, out of his descendants there. So I hope that makes some sense there. So, but we will have complete with list and everything, and charts and all that kind of stuff. So, because I have to kind of look back at it again, and because it's a lot of different people, and you're right. Some of them they talk about a lot, and some of them you don't hear too much about. Any other thoughts here? Or questions?
I have another question, and I'm sorry if you hear a crying baby in the background. She's mad that her tablet got taken away. When it talks about Abram, the covenant of the circumcision, and then when you go again in the New Testament trying to compare it, where circumcision kind of changes
Yes.
from male circumcision, then it changes to like the circumcision of the heart and baptism, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
How does that kind of relate to the first covenant of the circumcision? That's where I'm kind of having a little bit of trouble when it comes to comparing those two folks with that.
Yeah, well, Abraham, God instituted the covenant of circumcision with Abraham, and that was something that was unique to the people of Israel. It was also a religious thing too. It was a sign of faith, that they were going to raise their family, raise their children to honor God, according to the way Jehovah God had described. And so you have this this physical act, this thing, the circumcision that's there, but it is also, like you said, it's a very important thing. The circumcision of the heart is the more important thing of it. What happened is, over time, because the Jews had this symbol of circumcision, that became a point of pride. So as a matter of fact, if they would use that term as a term of denigration or a term of contempt for Gentiles, oh, you uncircumcised Gentiles, you it was a way, it was a term of contempt, but that contempt carried with it this idea of pride. Now, where they misused this is that they thought, okay, I've done these things, that makes me right with God, and because it makes me better than other people. That physical thing itself is the thing that makes me right by God. The thing that made Abraham right by God was the grace of God and Abraham responding by faith. It was by faith, Abraham. So now, it was the kind of faith that caused him to be obedient when God asked him. And so faith without obedience is dead, you know. So you carry that forward to the New Testament. So now circumcision is no longer required as a part of being a follower of Christ. So that was a controversy in the early church. Did you need to be circumcised first and then baptized? And that was absolutely not required. Several of the New Testament books talk about that in detail, especially Romans and especially Galatians. Galatians hits that pretty hard. That it is not required to be circumcised. That's going back to the old covenant. However, we still are told we come to God by faith through Christ. Now, I guess the closest thing we could compare to circumcision of the Old Testament would be baptism of the New Testament. God has given us this command, and by faith we obey that command. And it says, "Be baptized, every one of you, for forgiveness of your sins, and you'll receive the gift of the Holy Spirit." In a sense, it's kind of this sign. Circumcision was a sign of the covenant. Baptism kind of serves as a symbol, the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. However, we can't treat that with pride and say that, hey, there's something magical in the water. I know you were baptized here recently, and you can attest it was just good old Heath City water, in our baptistry there. So there was nothing magical in that, and we can learn from the Jews of the Old Testament to not give in to spiritual pride and say that, okay, that act itself, the water itself is what saves you. If that were true, then we just go push people in a pool all day. It's by faith. That is, when you're baptized, you are responding by faith. And is that what you were getting at there, Abby? And don't ever.
Just having a hard time comparing the two, because I'm like, well, how does that relate to the heart beat? If that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure, and make sure that baby has that iPad. That child needs that.
Oh yeah, well, she got in trouble, so.
And I think another thing on that, we're talking about circumcision. Now, Paul was one of the preachers, now we're getting from Genesis to what Paul was talking about in the New Testament. Paul was one of the biggest ones saying, you do not need to be circumcised. And I mean, he really just raked the Galatians over the coals about that, because they were going back to some of the old ways. However, there was a time when Paul had a young preacher by the name of Timothy, who was a Gentile, but he was a believer. He was preaching, and he was assisting Paul in his ministry. They were going to go to a region of that time where a lot of Jews were. And so what Paul did was that so Timothy could just have ministry without distraction, he had Timothy circumcised before they went over there. It was not anything to do with his salvation, but it did have to do with being more effective in the gospel. And sometimes there are things that you do. This is not going to earn my salvation, or it's not, but I'm going to do this so I can have an opportunity to, if it's not something that's sinful, I'm going to do this so I can share the gospel.